and welcome to our program. Today we are getting to know a little bit more about the project in the footsteps of the past. So the project created small stations about archaeological finds around Bullingsue. Now we are going to meet Nina from Museum Silkeborg and get to know a little bit more about it. Let's go. When you were preparing this route, did you already have all the information that you used here, or did some other story also appeared that you were not really counting on, or you found something else?
No, I think we had everything, but just had to look through the archives and find the stories. And then of course we got some new results. So for instance, a few years ago we got a new radiocarbon date of Toloman. So we know, and this is really amazing, we know that he died sometime between 405 and 380 BC. So it's within a time frame of only 24 years.
I don't really understand.
It is amazing.
I'm sorry.
It's really amazing that you can date him so accurately.
Okay.
So now, for instance, we know that he lived at the same time as Socrates. So while Socrates was walking around in the streets of Athens, a Toloman was out here living in primitive houses and probably being a farmer and stuff like that. So that's quite interesting when you can place him in a historical context as well.
Okay.
And what we really would like to do is also to try to redate Ellingwoman to see how does she relate to Toloman in time. So when they sacrificed Toloman or sacrificed Ellingwoman, would they still be remembering the sacrifice of Toloman, or did the two persons know each other? There's so many questions that would be nice to find out.
And right now, how is the dating of the woman?
Slightly later, but it's very broad.
Okay. How broad is it?
From 200 and
something
to 350 or something like that.
Okay, so it's like maybe 100 something years in between. Was that the same with Toloman before?
Yeah, before. Yeah. It was a very broad date, but then we used some new methods and we modeled the date based on several different radiocarbon dates, and then we were just really lucky that we hit the calibration curve on a very steep point. It's a bit technical, but when you get the radiocarbon dates, you have to calibrate them to ordinary years.
Okay.
And you have a calibration curve, and if you're hitting a very flat part of the curve, then you will get a very broad date. But here we hit a very steep part of the curve, and you get a very narrow date. So we're just really lucky.
Okay. So I wanted to understand how smaller was the difference in between the past method that you used and the current one. But yeah, from 100 and something years to
150
24.
years or something to like 24, 25 years.
Yeah. Okay. And those 150, is it usually the margin?
It depends on where you hit the curve.
Okay, so
and
every
also,
case is a special case. There's no general rules or something like this. Okay. Okay. Is there something else you would like to add on this spot?
You might have noticed this one. So this kind of marks the spot, or marks the finding of Toloman.
Okay.
So he was found the 6th of May in 1950. This was placed here in the 70s, and apparently it was placed here because when they were going down here, it was just too wet and swampy, and they couldn't go any further.
Okay.
So they just had to put it up here because, in fact, it was a little further, like 15 meters in here, that Toloman was found.
Can you show us the spot when we go?
Not exactly, because it's on the private land, so you're not allowed to go in there. But
that's
it's in there. Yeah.
Okay. Was it also? I mean, it was a private land already before, right? When it was found.
Yes.
It has always been
new owners today.
Okay, but it has always been. Yeah. Okay. Okay. That's too bad. So this is one of the complications that you were talking about before.
But now let's go into the bog, because this is really amazing what happens in the bog. It's because of the bog that we have Toloman and the other bog bodies preserved.
Yeah.
So,
How wet and muddy is it nowadays?
Well, you can see here. This is sphagnum. This is peat moss, and this is what really causes the preservation of bog bodies, because it causes the area to be very acidic, and there are some different sugar compounds that are that appear when the moss decomposes. Okay. Which is what makes which almost tans the bog body. So you can see it's brown. When you look at the Toloman, he's brown and almost like leather. Okay. And the hair is red. It's because of these different acids and so on. And what is also amazing about this is that it's really wet. It's like a swamp. So even though you it doesn't have access straight down to the water, it can suck up the water, and it will be very wet, and that's very important for the bog bodies to be preserved. Okay. But I can just show you something. We want to tell a story in different ways, and we've made a labyrinth to tell you how the bog bodies are preserved.
So this is also why there's this
bridge, because
right
it's very watery.
Okay, now you can see. But it just rained also, so.
So we want this also to be something for the kids, and want to tell this in a funny way, or more exciting way, hopefully. Now it's going to rain again. So here we talk about how the bog bodies form. So the story here is that there's a crisis in this Iron Age community, so you therefore decide to sacrifice one of you, because they hope this will help them. Okay, so here you can see how bog bodies form. So what has to be present in order for us to have this preservation of the bodies that are dumped. Okay. So, we want to do this in an interesting way. So instead of just putting on a lot of text on the information board, we have made this labyrinth. So perhaps, I don't know if you want to try it.
Yeah.
But, okay, the story is that there's a crisis in this the Iron Age community. So you therefore decide that you want to sacrifice one of you. Mm-hmm. So the question is then, will this body that is placed in the bog then turn into a bog body 2,000 years later? And it all depends on when and how and where you place the body. So the first question is, where do you place the body? Or when do you place the body in the bog? Is it in a lovely summer day or a cold winter's day?
I don't know.
No, just choose.
No. But I'm guessing the winter is a bit harder time, so maybe that's when they have sacrifices?
Try.
Okay, yeah. Let's go with the winter.
Okay, so...
Yes.
Okay, so the temperature beneath 5 degrees will make it less likely to rot, just like in a refrigerator. So it was a good choice, because then it doesn't rot immediately. So you then move on.
So it was not the same train of thought, but it led to the...
So where do you place the body in the bog? Do you just... Or how do you place the body in the bog? Do you just dump it? Or do you take care of it not being held down in the water? What do you do?
Maybe the second one?
Oh, you're good.
Well, you were giving me the
I already gave you the
before.
clue. Okay, so in this oxygen poor environment, in the wet bog, the body is really well protected. So that's also a good point. So we move on then. So in what type of bog do you place the body? Is it in a calcareous bog, or is it in an acidic bog?
Well, acidic
Try the other one. Try the calcareous.
One.
Okay, because if that happens, you end up here. And this is really interesting, because then if you place it in a calcareous wetland, well, all the hair and the skin, it will disappear, but you will still have the bones preserved. So what we do find...
What usually happens?
You sometimes find these as well. So in the areas where you don't have the acidic bogs, you find bog skeletons instead. Okay. So that's actually quite interesting. But yeah, of course, you need the acidic raised bog in order for the body to be preserved. So you have to have the very acidic, oxygen poor, nutrient poor environment in order for the bodies to preserve. And then you get the preserved skin and hair and everything.
Okay, and what did these two was if the wrong answer? You choose the wrong answer,
if you place, we know that it has to be in the winter time, because otherwise it would just start rotting immediately. We also believe that you have to keep the body down somehow, because when the body starts to rot, there's a lot of gases in the stomach, and it will float to the top, and then again you have the oxygen, and the bacteria will start to decompose the body. So no oxygen, a lot of water, a lot of acids, and you will have your bog body.
Okay. Cool.
And
could that happen nowadays?
Yes, if you have, of course. If we place if you place you in the bog, then. But what happens also in this very acidic environment is that the calcium will be removed from the bones, and they will start to be very rubbery. So in the exhibition at the museum, you can see this very strangely shaped femur, and this is just because you can bend it when it becomes quite soft, and you can bend it when it lies in the bog.
It's really weird.
Yeah.
And what is the plant there?
That's sphagnum moss, the plant
one
I
you
showed.
him.
Yeah,
Okay.
which is, yeah, it's, you need to have this in order for the bug bodies to be preserved.
Okay. Cool. This was fun.
I hope so. Oh, another thing.
Wait.
Okay, just take a look out there on the tree.
Ah,
So
it has
you see this? Okay, this is approximately how far up the bog was to begin with. So a lot of peat has been dug away. So several meters.
Yeah.
A lot of hard work.
Yeah. So this was mainly this difference was mainly made by people, right?
Yeah, it was just people
not
cutting peat so they could use it for fuel.
Yeah. So it was something. If people would have not intervened, it would stay.
Yeah,
it would have stayed.
So here you can see the actual shore of the valley. So you still have peat preserved here, and it goes all the way up to here. So that would have been kind of the level. Well, it's a raised bog, so it can also, it's not just flat like this, but it gives you an idea of, how far above the surface today that it was back then.
Yeah, and here I cannot really understand it, but standing there and seeing the high mark, wow.
That's a lot of peat.
Yeah. And when did people stop going for peat in here?
I think in the 1950s it really, after that it really slows down. The last time was probably about in the 1970s, and then it stopped.
Okay. Was there any particular?
Well, you
reason?
just don't use peat for fuel anymore.
Okay, that was the only reason. If we would still use it, it will still be.
Perhaps in these days where it's difficult to get the gas from Russia and stuff like that, people will start using.
Or go back to back to their origins.
So this is actually a station where we talk about the finds that have been found in the peat. So the 3 bug bodies, but also there's been corduroy road across the bog, and we have found peat spades from the late Bronze, early Iron Age. So as I told you, Toloman was probably found in an old pit from peat cutting. Elling woman, that's the same. So they were cutting peat already back then. So here we tell the story about that. And in fact, I like the story about Elling woman, because when she was found in 1938, they were again just digging, and suddenly again they found some hides, and they thought this was just an animal.
Do you actually find a lot of animals?
I don't know.
Okay. I mean, for them to assume
probably,
every time.
They probably some animals drowned in areas like this. It's very swampy terrain, so it's probably not uncommon. But still, they were interested in this. So they called a local guy who was interested in archaeology, and he said this is just an animal, and he kept digging until they found the belt of Elling woman. And then, you know, it was a nicely sewn belt, so they could see this was not an animal.
Yeah.
And then finally they called the National Museum, who then came to the site and built a crate around the body and took it to the National Museum.
Okay.
So and that was very important, so people could take care of it.
Yeah.
And the same regarding Toloman. He was found in 1950, and they were out digging peat.
Hi. Hi.
The Højgaard family were out here in Bjelskodal digging peat, and you know, suddenly they hit something, and you know, they thought perhaps it was just a root or something like that. But the day before that, they had found something, a wooden object. It was in fact a peat spade. They probably didn't know it, but they knew they had found something special. And so the woman said, "Well, take care. Perhaps there's something exciting here." And she jumped down into the hole and started digging it out with her bare hands. And suddenly, her fingers slipped into the area between the skull and and the cap. And so they were standing. They were then standing face to face with this body in the peat. And they were just, what's this? And
there was traumatizing.
There was a history about there was a schoolboy from Zealand who had disappeared, you know, some time ago. So at first they thought perhaps, was this the boy?
Oh.
So, or was this a recent murder or whatever? So they called the police. But when they heard that it was found, you know, several meters into the peat, they could say this is not a modern murder case. So instead they called the archaeology professor from Aarhus, P.V. Glob, who came to the site. And he had previously been working on some of the other bog bodies from Denmark, from Bormose. So when he came to the site, he said immediately, this is a bog body. Then he even said it's probably from the Iron Age, because that's the period where most of these bog bodies are from. Mm-hmm. So he also advised them to build this crate around the body instead of excavating it in the bog. It would be better to transport this to the National Museum. So they did that, and they actually took it all the way over to the other side of the lake, to the small village called Moselund, where there was a train station, and then he was sent by train to the National Museum. And here he was then carefully excavated, and they found out, you know, the way he died, and he was sent to the hospital where they did all these medical examinations that took out the intestines and you know, looked at the stomach contents and stuff like that. Did a lot of X-rays. They could see that the brain had shrunk in his head, but otherwise, you know, was very well preserved. And then, of course, they had to decide what to do with this body. And the museum in Silkeborg was just starting to develop, and they really wanted to have this bog body to the museum, because, you know, that would be really exciting. But at the National Museum, they were kind of not too keen on doing this. So they said this would be too macabre a sight for visitors to see this partly decomposed body, and also. And that was probably the main reason they didn't know how to go about conserving Toloman. So in the end, because there was a very different preservation, Toloman, you know, some parts were very well preserved, like his head, his feet, thumb, and other parts were very decomposed. So instead they decided to chop off his head and then focus on conserving this part. They then did a great job of doing this, and you know, after some time they could actually get this head back to the Museum Silkeborg, where it was then put on display. And then we have all the other bits and pieces still at the museum.
But now it looks like put together.
No, we decided not to put these together because it would be strange to place a very well-preserved head together with just decomposed material.
Okay.
So we recreated the body as it was when it was found based on pictures and stuff like that. And then the remaining parts are partly in the exhibition, where we also tell about the story about like the bent bones and stuff like that. And then we have the rest of the body stored
In some, like somewhere.
at the museum, so we can use that for research.
That was it for today. Unfortunately, we had to stop the program because of the weather conditions, but we'll come back and continue soon. See you.